Funk was the youngest child in her family, and everyone loved her so much. Her father, Pastor Adewale, was the master of a big church in Lagos. Every Sunday, the church was full of people who came to hear him preach. They respected him deeply, not just because of his words, but because of the way he lived his life. Her mother, Mama Teyo, was also highly respected. She led the women in the church, taught them how to pray, and was always there when someone needed advice. Funk was their only daughter, the flower of the family. She had two older brothers, Teyo and Connor, who often teased her but also protected her like their treasure. While other children in Lagos sometimes struggled with what to eat or what to wear, Funk's life was different. She always had the best clothes, the latest shoes, and all the things she ever wanted. Her parents never allowed her to lack anything. At school, everyone admired her beauty and the way she carried herself. Her skin glowed, her smile was bright, and her long hair always made people turn their heads. Teachers treated her kindly, and classmates wanted to be her friend. But sometimes, behind her charming smile, Funk carried a small pride she didn't notice. Being pampered made her think life was always supposed to be easy, and that she would never face real struggles. As Funk grew older, the pampering in her home grew with her. She never lifted a finger to do anything in the house. While other girls her age learned how to cook, clean, and help their mothers, Funk sat with her phone in her hand, scrolling through pictures or watching TV. The maids did all the work, and if they delayed even a little, Funk's voice would rise like thunder. "Why is my food not ready yet? Are you all sleeping in the kitchen?" she would shout. Sometimes she even banged the table until the maid rushed in, shaking with fear. When her school driver arrived late to pick her up, Funk didn't keep quiet either. She insulted him without care. "You are useless. Can't you keep time? Do you know how long I've been standing outside?" she would snap, not minding that he was old enough to be her father. The sad part was that no one corrected her. Her mother only smiled and said, "Leave her, she's still young." Her father would laugh and pat her head, "My jewel, you have a sharp mouth, just like me when I was your age." Even her brothers took her side and told anyone who complained, "That's just how Funk is. Don't take it personally." Years passed like that. Funk grew into a beautiful young lady but with an arrogant heart. She looked down on strangers, spoke rudely to elderly people in the neighborhood, and believed everyone was beneath her. People whispered behind her back, calling her spoiled and disrespectful, but she didn't care. Why should she? In her world, she was the princess, and nobody dared challenge her. Funk's years in the university did not change her. While some students struggled with money, washed their clothes by hand, or cooked noodles late at night, Funk always had her way. Her parents sent her enough money, and she lived like a princess even in school. When she finally graduated, she went to the NYSC camp, but she was still the same. Other coppers woke up before dawn, queued for food, and joined drills in the sun, but Funk behaved differently. She wore heavy makeup, fixed her long eyelashes, and polished her nails until they sparkled. While others sweated in their khaki uniforms, she strode as if she was on a fashion runway. Some laughed at her behind her back, others admired her beauty, but nobody challenged her arrogance. She talked down on her fellow coppers, shouted at camp officials, and ignored advice from older people. To her, life was simple, she deserved the best, and nothing less. After service, life seemed to favor her again. She met Femi, a handsome and wealthy young man from a respected Lagos family. He fell in love with her beauty at first sight, not knowing what lay hidden in her character. Their courtship was short, and before long, a grand wedding was planned. The church was decorated with fresh flowers, the hall glittered with lights, and music filled the air. Guests ate to their fill, dancing until their feet hurt. Everyone talked about it as one of the biggest weddings of the year. Funk wore a sparkling white gown and walked proudly down the aisle, her smile wide, her head held high. She had everything a girl could dream of: beauty, money, and now a husband who adored her. But soon after the wedding, the same old habits followed her into her new home. At home, she scolded her housemaids for every mistake, no matter how small. If the food had too much salt, she shouted. If her clothes were not ironed perfectly, she shouted louder. Nobody ever seemed to do anything right in Funk's eyes. Yet, her husband kept quiet at first, trying to keep peace in the home. Femi loved his wife too much to see her fault. To him, Funk was the perfect woman. Whenever she raised her voice at the maids, he told himself it was just her way of expressing herself. Whenever
Funk
she
is
is my queen, he often said to his friends. She deserves the best. His love blinded him so much that he never once corrected her. He thought keeping quiet meant keeping peace, but silence sometimes becomes poison. In their home, the maids lived in constant fear. A slight mistake could cost them their job. If breakfast arrived late, Funk would shout until her voice echoed across the compound. If dinner wasn't exactly the way she wanted, she threw the plate aside in anger. Are you blind? Can't you cook properly? She would yell at the poor maid, her eyes blazing. Some maids left crying, their hearts heavy with shame. Others were thrown out immediately without pay, their belongings packed in black nylon bags and pushed outside the gate. The neighborhood began to notice. People whispered about the young woman who never appreciated anyone, who treated workers like dirt. Some said, her beauty is only on the outside. Others shook their heads and muttered, one day, she will meet someone who will not tolerate her. But inside her home, Funk did not notice the danger building around her. Femi still loved her blindly, choosing not to see the truth. The maids came and went like shadows, each one chased out for one small mistake. Yet Funk believed she was living her best life, powerful, untouchable, and in control. After many months of chasing out local maids, Funk became frustrated. She could not find anyone in town willing to work for her anymore. Word had spread quickly among housemaids about the young madam who shouted, insulted, and sacked workers without warning. No one wanted to risk working in her house. One evening, as she complained bitterly about her food arriving late again, she turned to her husband. Femi, I can't keep living like this. I need a proper maid. Not these lazy girls that come and go. Femi hesitated. He loved his wife, but he also knew her reputation with housemates. Still, he wanted peace. So, with a heavy sigh, he contacted a professional home service agency. The agency provided trained staff, cleaners, cooks, gardeners, and even drivers. Within a few days, papers were signed, and everything was official. The new maid, Abike, arrived with a calm smile. She was well-trained, polite, and carried herself with quiet confidence. At first, Funk treated her the same way she had treated all others, shouting when meals were delayed, criticizing her work, and throwing commands around carelessly. But Abike did not flinch. She did her job perfectly, her meals delicious, her cleaning spotless. Days turned into weeks, and slowly something surprising began to happen. Funk, who had always found fault in every meal, suddenly started to eat without complaint. Her shouting reduced, her insults grew fewer. Every evening, she looked forward to Abike's meals, sometimes even smiling after eating. Femi noticed the change. One night, as he watched his wife finish a plate of jollof rice without saying a single negative word, he raised his brows in surprise. Funk, you didn't complain today, he said with a small smile. Funk shrugged but couldn't hide the satisfaction in her eyes. Her food is good. I like it. Femi's heart lifted with relief. For the first time, he felt hope that maybe his wife could change. Maybe, just maybe, life with Funk would no longer be filled with endless shouting. But what Femi didn't know was that this change in Funk wasn't just about the food. Something deeper was happening inside her, something even Funk herself could not explain. As the years passed, Abike proved herself as the most reliable maid Funk had ever employed. She did her duty diligently, cooking delicious meals, cleaning the house until it sparkled, and serving with a constant smile. Funk, for once, stopped shouting and scolding. Her voice no longer shook the walls with anger. Instead, she ate her food quietly, sometimes even nodding in approval. Abike was pleased, and she worked even harder, believing she had finally found peace in her job. But peace in the Adewale household was short-lived. One evening, Funk complained of sudden stomach pains and weakness. Her skin grew pale, and before long, she fainted. Femi rushed her to the hospital, his hands trembling as he drove. The doctors worked quickly, running test after test, until finally they returned with heavy faces. "Sir," the doctor said, "your wife has suffered a miscarriage. And there is an infection in her womb. She will need surgery." The news shattered Funk's heart. She cried into Femi's chest, her tears soaking his shirt. "Our baby, Femi. I lost our baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. Femi held her, his own eyes wet, whispering prayers under his breath. She was admitted immediately, and the surgery was scheduled. While Funk lay in the hospital bed, fighting for her life, the atmosphere in their home began to shift dangerously. Abike, once modest, changed her dressing. Whenever she was alone with Femi, she wore tighter skirts, shorter blouses, clothes that revealed too much of her skin. She walked slowly past him, bent too low while cleaning, and let her eyes linger on him longer than necessary. At first, Femi resisted. He was a disciplined man, a respected figure in his church, and he told himself he must not fall. He avoided her eyes, prayed silently for strength, and reminded himself of his love for Funk. But he also told himself another excuse: Abike was the only maid his wife had never complained about. Sending her away might anger Funk once she recovered. And so, he let her stay. One night, after a long day at the hospital, Femi returned home weary and broken. Abike met him at the door, her clothes clinging to her body, her perfume strong. She touched his hand gently and whispered, "Sir, you need rest." His heart pounded, torn between guilt and desire. That night, his weakness defeated him. He gave in. They made love, and the line was crossed. What began as one moment of weakness soon became a hidden pattern. While Funk was still in the hospital recovering, Femi and Abike continued their secret affair. Weeks later, the surgery was successful. Funk was alive, and her face lit up with gratitude. But the doctor's words carved scars into her soul. "Mrs. Adewale," he said softly, "your womb is badly damaged. You will no longer be able to carry children." The room fell silent. Funk's heart crumbled, her dreams of motherhood gone in an instant. She held her chest, sobbing bitterly. Yet, through the tears, she whispered, "Thank you, Lord, at least I am alive." She had no idea that while she clung to life in the hospital, her home was quietly slipping away. When Funk was finally discharged from the hospital, she returned home weak but hopeful. She thanked God for sparing her life and looked forward to resting in her own bed. Femi welcomed her warmly, helping her settle back into the house. Abike also smiled and served her food as if nothing had happened. Funk never suspected a thing. To her, life was slowly returning to normal. She didn't know that while she was fighting for her life, her husband and maid had been crossing boundaries she could never imagine. But truth, no matter how well hidden, always finds its way out. One evening, weeks after Funk had returned, Abike sat Femi down nervously. Her hands shook slightly, and her eyes avoided his. "Sir," she whispered, "there is something you must know. I am pregnant." Femi froze, his heart pounding. The words pierced him like a knife. "Pregnant?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Are you sure?" Abike nodded. "Yes, sir." "It is your child?" A wave of fear crashed over him. He grabbed her arms and hissed, "This cannot happen. You must get rid of it." But Abike pulled away, her voice suddenly firm. "No. I will not abort this baby. I am keeping it." Femi's face darkened with anger. He threatened, begged, and warned, but Abike stood her ground. "This child will live," she said boldly. Months passed, and Abike's stomach began to show. At first, Funk noticed her maid looking fuller, but she brushed it aside. Until one afternoon, as she entered the living room, she saw Abike standing in plain view, her rounded belly impossible to hide. Funk's heart skipped a beat. "Abike," she whispered, her voice trembling. You're pregnant." The silence was deafening. Femi tried to speak, but Funk's eyes turned to him sharply. The truth hit her like thunder. Tears welled in her eyes as she staggered back. "Femi, how could you?" The house fell into chaos. Funk confronted Abike in the presence of the family, demanding an explanation. But instead of shame, Abike stood tall, her voice strong and merciless. "Yes," she said, her eyes blazing. "I am carrying your husband's child. And do you know why? This is my revenge for the way you treated me, your insults, your harsh words, your pride. This is my payback." Funk gasped, her chest tightening with pain. She shook her head in disbelief, unable to control her tears. But Abike wasn't finished. With cold eyes, she declared, "Do you think your miscarriage was an accident? It was me. I made sure you lost that baby. I made sure your womb was damaged. You can never be a mother again, and now, I will give your husband the child you could not." The room exploded in shouts and cries. Funk collapsed onto a chair, her body trembling as betrayal and shame swallowed her whole. Femi buried his face in his palms, broken and speechless. The perfect life they had built was falling apart, piece by piece, right in front of them. Funk had no choice but to let the maid go. She sacked her immediately, though her heart was filled with pain and regret. This made Funk feel helpless. From that day onwards, she realized how her mistakes had opened the door to her own pain. She had been too proud, too harsh, and too dependent on others. Now, the very maid she mistreated had taken what she cherished most. Funk made a silent vow in her heart. She decided to push herself to learn everything she once ignored: cooking, cleaning, even managing her own home without complaint. Each day she woke up early, tied her wrapper firmly, and moved around the house with determination. She burnt her fingers sometimes while cooking, but she smiled through the pain. She swept until her back ached, but she didn't stop. She wanted to build herself again, brick by brick. Though the trust between her and Femi was broken and their marriage bond was scattered, she chose to look past it. She reminded herself daily that bitterness would only destroy her faster. Her lifestyle was not the same as before, it was quieter, lonelier, and filled with reflection. But in that silence, she found peace. She no longer shouted at anyone, she no longer complained unnecessarily. Instead, she humbled herself and tried to rebuild her life from the ashes of her mistakes. And so, Funk's new beginning was not sweet, but it was peaceful. Some lessons we can all learn from this story are clear: no matter your position in life, never look down on anyone, and always treat people with kindness and respect, because you never know how they might repay you when the tables turn. But now I want to hear from you. If you were in Funk's shoes, would you forgive your husband and try to rebuild your marriage, or would you accept the maid and allow her to stay until she gives birth to the child? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section. What would you do if you were in such a situation, or if it happened to someone you know, how would you advise them? Thank you so much for watching today's video. I truly appreciate your time and support. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. More inspiring and thought-provoking stories are coming your way.